My dear friends, we have reached the 31st Sunday in the ordinary time, which means that there are only 2 Sundays remaining, and then we'll have Christ the King that will conclude the calendar of the church for this year. And so today it brings us to the very heart of the gospel and life and teaching of Jesus, which is the commandment of love. Love God and neighbor. And this is the very essence of holiness. So it is so important that all of us are following Jesus and then seeking Him. That is the very thing that we are talking about here. It's about sanctification and holiness. So we will focus into this. And as you know, last Thursday was All Saints' Day. And I know it was a holiday of obligation, but in my 10 o'clock Mass in the morning, there were only about roughly 300 people. So you can expect long lines in confession. Just a joke. I told the people that it is not just simply an obligation. I don't want to use this word obligation because it's so negative. I thank the people who came because that is the least that we can do to express gratitude to the saints because they help us. You know, they intercede for us. They watch over us. Like St. Vincent de Paul, it is very clear that he is leading the parish. We can feel it, you know. And the thing that we have achieved up to this point is through his intercession. And so that's the least that we can do to come, celebrate their feasts with the desire to be like them. That is not an obligation. You know, that is our desire to imitate their sanctification. So, to put the theme of love of God and neighbor in liturgical context, we will put it in the theme of sainthood. You know, somebody was saying, Father, could you bring the homily on Sunday so that more people will hear it and it will be recorded in the website? So anytime we need to consult the points, it's accessible. We can stream it in the website. So that's why I'm talking about that today. But it is with the very within the context of liturgy that we will talk about the saints, and then sainthood, and how to become a saint. You know, how many of you want to become a saint? Oh, very few people. The rest are not raising. That's all of us want to become a saint, and so hopefully, at the second part, after we talk with the saints, I will give you some points. I did not invent this. This is reading from the lives of the saints, the experiences in the journey of sainthood that's common to many of them. We will enumerate also the saints that live this, so we can connect with them. And as we know that we venerate the saints, we honor them, we don't worship them. We have pictures and statues. We are not worshiping wood or cement, but reminders of our loved ones. Like the people you love, you open your wallet, you have picture of people that you love, your iPads, you know, that you carry them. You are not worshiping electronics or ink, but you are reminded that your loved ones are with you, and that is the idea. So let's talk about the saints. You know, first of all, you look at the history of the church, and we have the path to sanctification, the path to sainthood is open to all. It's open to all. From the babies to old people, monarchs and slaves, men, women, children, all kinds of people, which means that, you know, the path, the road is open to everybody. And that, if you look at the history, as young as 4 years old. Saint Peter Julian Amard, he was only 4 when his mother told him that Jesus is inside the tabernacle. And so what he did was he got a chair and then put his ear at the door of the tabernacle because he wants to listen to Jesus inside. You know, he was the one who founded the Congregation of Perpetual Adoration. He was only 4. And then Saint Pancras, during the persecution in Rome, he was 6. After the Eucharist in the catacombs, his mother was sick, so he got the sacrament and brought the sacrament to his mother at home. And he was met by a soldier, and the soldier told him, throw it away. Throw it away. And he would not. He was hit by a solid metal club that broke his skull. He was only 6. And then you have Aloysius Gonzaga, who was a monarch, royal family. He was a page in the court of the Medicis. And then he was helping there, and he was not very impressed with the lifestyle of people partying and all kinds of stuff. And he said, no, that it will not be my life. He became a saint, and he died at 22. Monarch, he was very wealthy, helping the sick people. And he died. He contracted the illness, and he died at 22. So, you know, this from babies, you know, who have received. You know, the very essence of holiness is holiness comes from God. You know, it does not come from us because we are not capable of that. It is a gratuitous gift from God. God gives it to us. He shares His life to us, and then we are open to receive it. So, and holiness is from Him. So you cannot force it. There are people who want to appear holy, but if it is not from God, it will be painful, you know, because it is not spontaneous. It is effortless and spontaneous because it is supported by tremendous grace. You cannot force it, otherwise you become self-righteous. But it is coming from Him, and it is received by these people as early as babies to old people. So, the record of the saints is amazing, and we go straight to the points. How do we become saints? You know, how can we imitate the saints? So, since we were young, we were told to read the lives of the saints because we learn from their lives and we can connect with them. So, I'll give you 5 points that our similar experiences, parallel experiences of these people in their journey to sainthood, that any of these points, that experiences that they had, led them to God, and then led him to this wonderful life of sanctity and holiness. So the first, and then we will enumerate the saints who underwent these experiences. There are 5 of them in their journey to sainthood. And again, it is an open road that we are invited to connect, so it can also help us in our journey of sanctification. The first experience of the saints, you know, that's very parallel and uncommon to them, is that they were tired of the bad things or evil things they were doing, and they could not take it anymore. You know, they got tired of the things that they were not happy about, and they are that restlessness, that longing that they have in their hearts, that they could not take it any longer. The first example of St. Augustine. St. Augustine is a perfect example. You know, he was a prominent man in Tagaste, northern Africa, and he was popular, he was powerful, but all the womanizing and all failed relationships, His mother, Saint Monica, told him, he said, my mother told me to leave this woman because it is immoral, but she did not tell me that I could not get another one. That is the, the mentality of Augustine. But then he could not take it anymore. So his mentor was St. Ambrose of Milan, and he went to him, and he said, after reading from the book of the Romans, he fell to the floor and started weeping. And said, that's it. I cannot bear it anymore. I don't have peace. I don't have joy. It's a very heavy life. And I don't have the energy for all the pains and the broken relationships that he had no more. And then the conversion. You go to the gospel, the same thing with Zacchaeus. He was a tax collector, a public sinner. He had a mansion on the hill. He was so wealthy because he was supported by the Romans. But then at night, when everybody should be resting, looking at the coal on the hill, a beautiful mansion overlooking the city, he could not sleep. He was pacing, and with sweat on his forehead because of the so many people he defrauded, and the guilt, so many lives he destroyed because of his selfishness. He could not take it anymore. Like Matthew, the same thing, a tax collector, and they followed Jesus. Another good example is Saint Teresa of Avila. Probably one of the deepest and the holiest person, reformed the Carmelite order, and he wrote the book on the mansions. She was actually a socialite when she was young. She was a popular woman in the city, a prominent family. But then again, the longing, the longing in her heart that this is not the life I want to live, and that's it. I have to change. So she went into that very deep journey of holiness, and she's probably the greatest work that has ever written on spirituality by a saint, Saint Teresa. So they get tired of the things, and they could not take it anymore. Second experience of the saints. When you are transitioning, when a person is transitioning from the old life to the new life that's not yet there, that middle point, if you are taking a leap from one cliff to another, and you're on the air, you are airborne, taking a jump, that middle point is hard because they feel lost. They feel lost. It's actually very positive because they are journeying, but the point that you're leaving the old life is hard because your life was patterned after that, your connections, your activities, and at this point, you don't belong anywhere. So you feel a sense of being lost. The perfect example of this is Mother Teresa. We look at Mother Teresa and we think she's so, intense and so holy. And she says, no, my journey was hard. I envy those people who are really so intent in their spirituality. I had a rough time. Why? Because she went to India as a member of the Sisters of Charity. And most of them are executives in hospitals. They work in the office, administration. They have hospitals and schools and huge institutions. When she went to India, she was moved by extreme poverty of people dying in the streets. And as a mother of charity, she felt that she has to have hands-on to help these people. She did not want to sit down in a library or in an office or a huge building doing administration. So she left the order. And she was badly criticized by her colleagues. She was practically, she left the order. And after that, she felt lost. very depressed because there was no congregation yet. She didn't know where to start. She was transitioning. But it's actually very positive because it's journeying into the unknown, discovering new frontiers. But the journey from the old to new is hard. So it's normal, when you are trying to develop a spiritual life and then a kind of wanting a new life. There's that point where that's normal in the journey of a saint. The feeling of being lost. Now, the third experience is many of the saints experience turning points in their lives. Turning points that open new doors, that completely change their lives. It could be also a traumatic experience, something very violent. Like when you have accident, very traumatic, completely changing your life, turning you around. And the perfect example of this, Ignatius of Loyola. He was going home from the crusade, badly wounded and almost dead, broken from the crusades. And he has to stay in the hospital. That was a very traumatic experience, staying in the hospitals for days. And he had nothing to read. They gave him the Bible, and that helped him in the journey. Another turning point that is probably very relevant to us because it is in the modern period, St. Charles de Foucauld. He was an atheist. He didn't believe in God. He didn't in Paris. And one time it was Christmas Eve, very cold and freezing. And then he sought refuge in the Notre Basilica. He entered there. The place was almost midnight mass. It was so lighted, warm, beautiful colors, and the decorations. And sat at the end of the pew just to get some warmth. And then later on, I don't know what happened. He felt like there was something that was going into him. He felt so warm and so loved, as if somebody was embracing him. And that's it. That's a turning point. That is why it's very important to make the church beautiful, because it has the power to convert people. Just the music and the lighting and then he said this: once I believe in God, once I was convinced that God is real, I will give everything to Him, my whole life, everything. So that was the turning point in his life. But it changed him. And then he went to North Africa to help wounded soldiers. And he founded a congregation of humble brothers that take care of the sick, and that was his life. He's a model of humility in the modern period, Charles de Foucauld. Now, the fourth stage in the journey of the saint is the recovery after the trauma, life-changing, that they were touched by something, and they have decided to do something, but they don't know yet what it is. So the recovery is a combination of fear and excitement. That they are afraid, they're scared, but that they have to do something. That rehabilitation period from the trauma. The perfect example of this is our patron, Saint Vincent de Paul. When he was a young priest in Marseille, Montpellier, in France, he was captured on his way home by Islamic slave traders. He was captured, and then he was shipped to Ethiopia, sold as a slave. He stayed there for years. Probably you don't know about this, but this was the turning point in the life of Vincent de Paul. As a young priest, it was this experience that led him to sainthood. He was captured and sold as a slave. The first master was so cruel, but the second one, the second master was a married man, and since he was a really virtuous person and a good person, he worked hard in the fields, in the farms, and through his example, he converted the whole family. He changed them. He converted. They wanted to listen to him. And then, later on, after conversion, they gathered funds and secretly financed his return to France so he could get his freedom. So they experienced, the fear of the past. But then he said, I have to start something. Gratitude to God for saving me, that I'm back to France and I'm free again. So as a young priest, he went to Rome, did further studies, and then he already planned what to do. The first thing is to form a group of people, a congregation of missions. And this was the time when the church was challenged by Luther. And so the first thing he did was to gather the poor. Every time there are abuses in the church, every time there's abuse of power or whatever kind, especially now in the American church, we have to go back to take care of the poor. We have to, every time there is abuse of power, every time there is abuse of position, go back to the original calling. It was him and the other saints who saved the church because they went back to charity, taking care of the poor. Then they gathered the orphans and the widows and put up schools. And then they built orphanages and hospitals, seminaries to train ignorant clergy. And then they sent missions. That's what they did. Vincent de Paul. The recovery to save the church. Go back to the original mission that we have, like Jesus, who took care of the poor. The poor will be the one who will save the church in America, not arrogant, pompous leaders who are very proud of their palaces and their vestments. It will be the poor, like this, what the saints did to save the church. Then, the next journey, the final journey in the lives of the saints, the path of clarity. It is very clear. The path that they have to take, the path of clarity that will lead to glory. They have discovered very clearly that this is the path. They have made the decision. So for those of you who did not raise your hands, you have time to make your decision. They made the decision. I want to journey this path. The perfect example is Saint Therese of the Child Jesus. She was only 9 when they were playing on the beach with the sister Celine. This was the modern period already. And she was impressed by the sand, tiny sands that were blown by the wind, and they could fly. Very tiny sand. They're so light, but they can fly. This was the time when they were building elevators in Paris. And she said, in our modern time, people don't walk anymore, they fly. I want to fly. But in order to fly, I have to be tiny. I have to be humble and little, like the sand, so it can be carried by the wind. That was the beginning of the little way. The little way, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, the little way. You have to be humble, light, poor, so God can carry you and fly like the sand. Very clear path. And she was 16, she entered the monastery and became a nun, died at 24. But her life, Autobiography was the gift to the modern period, what it means to be simple and poor and holy. The same with Francis of Assisi. Surrounded by power and wealth, he was seeking peace, looking for an ideal. It will not be brought back by wealth and fame and prestige. He abandoned those, and very close life of Jesus embraced poverty and humility. Francis. So, this is the journey of the saint. Welcome to sainthood. Okay? And hope to see you in heaven.